Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus went up into the hills and summoned those he wanted. So they came to him, and he appointed 12. They were to be his companions and to be sent out to preach, with power to cast out devils. And so he appointed the 12: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter; James, the son of Zebedee; and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name Boanerges, or sons of thunder. Then Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, the man who was to betray him. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
So we continue with our journey through Mark, and we've come to a point where Jesus did not only make a decision to focus on his mission, despite the persecution that he was facing, despite the opposition he was facing from the religious leaders, but now he also wants to extend his ministry, and he appoints ambassadors, and he also shares his power with them, the power to cast out demons and the power to preach. And this happens on a mountain, and this is what I really want to talk about today, that he went up the mountain and he summoned his disciples. So this is also the symbol of authority. He went up to the mountain, he summons them, and they all came to him. So with that authority, he calls his disciples, and out of them he appointed the 12. And like I said, I wanted to talk about this symbol of climbing up the mountain and calling people to him. If we come from the Old Testament, we know of God calling Abraham and saying, "Come up the mountain with your son Isaac, and on this mountain, mountain of Moriah, in Genesis chapter 22, you would offer your son." And there, after we know the story, Abraham tried to kill his son, and then God intervenes. That becomes the great place of encounter between God and Abraham, and the place of the great promise of God to Abraham that he would be a father of all nations. And from that point, he becomes the father of faith, the place of encounter. And then we have the Israelites leaving Egypt, crossing the promised land, and then they come to the place of encounter at Mount Sinai. So Moses climbs up the mountain. God invites Moses to climb up the mountain, and then he gives him the Decalogue, the commandments, which hold on to this time. So it is so true that the mountain is a place of encounter. Even in the New Testament, many passages, like in Luke chapter 6, verse 12, when Luke's version of the appointment of the apostles, he says that Jesus went up the mountain and spent the night in prayer. So he encounters his Father in the mountain. And again, we hear in Mark's Gospel, chapter 6, we hear when Jesus sends his disciples on the boat to cross over to the other side, he went up the mountain to pray. So it's so important. And then in the end, we know the example of the Transfiguration, Jesus going up the mountain with Peter, James, and John, and then there is a place of encounter. They experience the self-revelation of Jesus. And then, last of all, Jesus climbing up Mount Calvary, where he made the ultimate sacrifice. So important that everything, the encounter, the salvation, the promise, is made on the mountain. And Jesus comes at this point. He wants to appoint his disciples, his apostles. He knows it's a very important mission he's about to make. He knows that he faces a lot of opposition, but he climbs up the mountain because he knows this is a place of security. He knows this is a place of encounter with his Father. He knows that it's a place where he remains untouchable. And it's an invitation for us as well that we have our own mountains that Christ himself has instituted to us. Even when we expose the Blessed Sacraments in the morning or during benediction, we always want to make it to look like we have to put it on the standard to symbolize a mountain, that Christ is up there, and that this is a place of encounter. And Jesus climbing up the mountain, especially in his deepest moments, knowing that he is going through a lot of difficulties, and even those moments where he knows that he is about, like during the Transfiguration, knowing that he is about to enter his passion, it shows that it's so important for him that he has this experience of encounter with the Father just about the time he is about to be persecuted, he's going through a lot of difficulties, he wants to make a very important decision, then he encounters the Father. And what does that tell us? That we, as Christians, we are followers of Christ, then we must also follow what he has left us behind as an example. We must have those moments that we must create to have an encounter with God. There are those moments that when we go through difficulties, when we go through persecutions, when we don't know what decision to make, when we are so confused, when we are so indifferent to the situation, and then there are those moments that we have to have a mountain experience, that experience of encounter with God, spending some hours in adoration, having some time in prayer, having some time in personal prayer, is that mountain experience, is the experience that Jesus always wanted to have with his Father, and all of us also are called to have with our Heavenly Father, to have with Jesus, who continues to intercede for us, as we hear in the first reading, being the eternal high priest. And it's so important for us that we must not forget this as Christians. It is true we might be very busy with a lot of things, but we must create those moments of encounter, those mountain experiences, those experiences where we want to be in the divine presence and submit and place and surrender all our difficulties, all the challenges that we are going through into the hands of our Heavenly Father, who cares so much for us, who loves us, and is always ready to dish out his graces upon us. And this is something we must not miss. We must not miss in our journey as Christians, in our journey through life, to be able to have those encounters, to be able to have that personal relationship, that deep moment of prayer, that deep moment of a mountain experience that will always change our lives, that will always take away our burdens, that will always give us the strength that we need, especially when we are weak. Let us therefore ask God for the grace to always invite us, that we always feel the invitation of God to encounter him in our moments of prayer.